and welcome back to my channel. I know I've kind of dropped the ball on uploading recently, and I haven't really been filming a lot of stuff that I've been sharing on here for riding and training wise. I'm going to film some more videos and vlogs and stuff with my horses soon, and some tutorials and stuff, especially as our weather gets better. But if you're after some like training videos and stuff like that, I highly recommend subscribing to my Patreon, because a lot of the footage I've been filming as of recently has been going to there, and you can subscribe to that for as little as $1 a month. But there's different tiers depending on how much training help and assistance you want, or if you want like video critiques to ask more questions and so on and so forth. So you can subscribe to that at the link down below in my description, and I highly recommend that. But today's video is going to be something different. I still think it's interesting. So the topic that I wanted to cover today is the topic of burnout in the horse world, because I don't think it's discussed enough, especially by equestrian professionals. And we also kind of glorify the idea of being burned out by making like it viewed as really, really cool to put a lot of work and free hours and your emotional energy and your physical energy and all your time into wanting to better yourself as a rider, or being a working student, or doing what it takes to become the best. And that entire mindset that if you really want something badly enough, you'll work hard enough to get it, and if you don't get it, then it's because you've not worked hard enough. And I think that's a really toxic mentality that is way too normalized in the horse world, unfortunately. And I wanted to talk about that because I think, first of all, this mindset kind of enables exploitation of workers like grooms and working students and stable hands and so on and so forth. But on top of that, it also like normalizes the idea that like your situation is a result of like your work, rather than like some people have inherent privileges that set them up better for success than other people, and this leads them to an easier path to their goals. So it kind of weaponizes hard work to take advantage of people who might be less fortunate and have less privileges to land them somewhere that they would like to be in the horse world. And it kind of puts their situation on their shoulders completely and says like, oh, if you worked hard enough, you'd get there. The opportunities are there. And like money's not an obstacle if you work hard enough. And I think that's a load of shit. And it really bothers me how normalized it is, because honestly, even within the last couple of years, I've seen so many job postings from barns where they are paying less than minimum wage. And when people complain about it, they're like, oh, like no one wants to work these days. Kids are so spoiled. And it's like, no, like you should be paying a working wage, especially when you're requiring people to have previous experience and extensive experience with horses. Like we shouldn't be normalizing the idea that people need to just take what employers offer them, even if it is not fair and doesn't actually line up with like how dangerous and difficult the jobs are, which honestly, like a lot of horse jobs are unsafe, and most of them don't come with any type of medical health care benefit whatsoever. And they also don't really pay you enough to be able to save along with paying rent and taking care of yourself if you were to become injured because of a horse that you're working with. And a lot of these barn jobs and training jobs require people to work with exceptionally dangerous horses. And then we're basically trying to blame people for not wanting to do that for no money. And this is just like one layer of the different types of burnout that horse people can experience. And this is just talking about like the overworking mentality and the culture around our horse world that kind of encourages people to allow themselves to be exploited, and that if they want something bad enough, they should work really hard. And it fails to keep in mind like how some person's definition of hard work might be actually a lot less obstacles than others. That's something that's also missed out. We don't really take the opportunity, like especially when we're talking about hard work and opportunity in the horse world, to actually discuss privilege and how privilege sets other people up for success, but then also makes it a lot harder for certain people to get to anywhere near the same level of horses. Like we know horses are expensive. This isn't me saying the sport should be free, and there's a certain level of privilege just to be around horses at all, yes. But to say that like hard work is how everyone gets everywhere, when some person's hard work might be literally working like part-time all through high school and then having to work a full-time job, taking on student loans, going into university and taking university courses all on top of while trying to work at a barn and continue to better themselves as a rider. That's a lot of more work than someone who works really hard in the barn and takes frequent lessons and is also going to university but has that entirely paid for and doesn't have to worry about paying living accommodations, food for their car, gas, etc. etc. Like those are two different levels of difficult, and it's not to write off the hard work of the person who has more financial support, but we also can't pretend that those are comparable in terms of like the amount of responsibility someone has to pull in revenue in order to take care of themselves. They're not on the same playing field. And I say this as someone who grew up in a family that was extremely privileged. We had a really nice house, we had lots of stuff, and all of my riding was completely covered, from everything from like getting my first horse to showing to riding lessons. And I took it for granted because I didn't recognize that there was an alternative to that. And then when we had all of our savings embezzled and lost our house and went bankrupt, and suddenly I was having to pull my own weight if I wanted to be around horses, and suddenly I was having to get a job and start doing more stuff, or losing privileges of having like nice things that we could easily buy before. That was a real wake-up call for me. And like there's no planet in which I could even say for a second that if I had continued to grow up where we had those finances to continue to support my riding career, that I wouldn't have had an easier time than I did when I lost them. Like there is no world in which that is possible. Honestly, like even with all the traumas and stuff that I've dealt with on top of that, having to not worry about the financial component of it would have taken an exponential amount of weight off of my shoulders in growing up and becoming a horse person. And I still benefited from the fact that my parents could afford to put me in lessons and could afford to teach me how to ride as well as I could by the time I lost all of that support, because then I was offered more free riding opportunities than someone who doesn't have that same level of experience, which makes sense because it's a safety thing, but it's a privilege that I was given because my parents could afford it. I didn't do anything to earn that other than be born into the right type of family to be able to afford it. And I don't think that I'm any more deserving than people who would love to do the same things but don't have the same amount of access. I just had the privilege that allowed me to kind of start on the path to getting to where I am now. And yes, there was a lot of challenges along the way when I did lose the financial privilege that I had growing up, and that made things a lot more difficult, and it was a real wake-up call and reality check. But I still benefit from massive financial privilege because I was able to learn how to ride and gain the experience I did before that happened, which in turn made it a lot easier to access free or cheap information and teaching and coaching and riding opportunities from other people. And I also had a horse purchased for me at a young age by my parents and was able to learn about the show world and be in lessons for a long time. So you get where I'm going here. It's not comparable to someone who has to jump through a lot of hoops or who has to work several hours a week just to be able to afford one lesson to go to. Like that is a hard position to be in, and those people aren't necessarily less talented riders. They just have less access to the horse world. And I think that the discussion of burnout is relevant when we're talking about these things, because a lot of these types of riders that are less fortunate are the ones that become the most burnt out, because they're basically gaslit into believing that it is their duty to work hard to completely overcome their situation, no matter how much society and the world puts in front of them to try to stop them from doing so. And if they're unable to overcome that despite all of their limitations, that it's somehow their fault and they haven't worked hard enough. That's an absurd mindset. And it comes from capitalism, because honestly, like, if hard work was reflected solely by your income and the amount of money you earned guaranteed how hard you worked, a lot of the people we see that are the top 1% of money earners in the world would not be there, because the people that are working the hardest are the ones that they're exploiting, that are at like the bottom and not making very much, or working like entry-level positions and hard jobs that a lot of us wouldn't want to work, and doing so and continuing to keep the world moving, but not being appreciated for it. And they aren't being paid accordingly for their hard work, if that makes sense. Anyways, I suppose this is a lengthy way to say that if you're working hard and not seeing much to show for it in the horse world and you're feeling burnt out, just recognize the fact that you're not alone and it's not fair, and that there's a lot of stuff that makes it inconvenient or very difficult or impossible to get to the same places that you might want to in the horse world, whereas it's easier for people who have the money to put into it. And this is a huge problem in our sport, because it makes it less about talent and more about who can afford to be there and who can afford to train with the right trainer who's going to get them recognized. And there's a massive lack of fairness. And again, this is not to suggest that people who have money are automatically just buying their way in. But if we had more incentives to allow riders from all backgrounds and all financial brackets to get into the horse world, and then actually have talent be selected, we would probably see more diversity in the sport because people wouldn't be getting priced out of the sport. And I think that allowing for that is actually fairness and equity, because then you're going to be getting onto special teams or to getting certain qualifications simply because of talent and because you deserve them, rather than making it all about like who can afford to be there, and then from that pool of people we're going to select who's the best person to be there. And since it is like that, and since it is so money based and financial based, and that there's like so much privilege involved in getting in the horse world, it's really suffocating. And it's also so easy to get burnt out because you feel like hopeless for wanting to dream and to have these goals. Like, for example, even for me, like from the age that I was like 4, I loved horses, and I was lucky enough to start riding at 4 because my parents, again, could afford to put me there. But it was always my dream to become a horse trainer. And when like high school rolled around after we'd gone like bankrupt and I was working now, and like it was a lot harder, horses were becoming less enjoyable. I wasn't as involved in showing anymore because I was getting out of the Arabian circuit and I just wasn't happy, and it was hard to find joy in riding. I honestly started to give up that dream of being a horse trainer, even though it had been such a long-term dream of mine. First of all, because of people making fun of me for being a horse girl. Secondly, because people told me it wasn't a viable career. Thirdly, because there's so many barriers in place to prevent people from becoming trainers, and people very much value a show record as a trainer, and I couldn't afford to continue buffering mine at that point because it's like literally paying for one show was like more than my entire part-time job income in high school. Like one A-rated show, more than that whole thing, and that's just for paying show fees, not for taking care of the horse. But there is all these barriers that made me look at it and go like, even though this is something that I wanted, like, do I want this anymore, or is it even possible, or is it worthless to be dreaming about this and to be putting my time into this if there's so many barriers to stop me from doing it, and if I don't think I'm going to be respected, if I don't have the money to show and overcome those barriers and kind of assimilate with the rest of the industry? And I decided I wanted to go to school to be a psychiatrist and study psychology. And that was like a goal of mine for much of high school. And then it was only like when I started taking more of the Guelph University courses and then got Milo after I graduated, that I really got back into horses and kind of found my passion again and wanted to actually pursue training and see how it goes, and felt that it was worth the risk of doing so. But before that, I was like, I don't know if this is worth it. And like, even though I'd have to go get student loans to go to school, is this something that could guarantee me more of a career, a safer career than being in the horse world? And that was something that I had to consider. And that choice was very much about like the lack of financial stability. Like if I had a family who was funding my riding career or funding my university education, I could have easily pursued training on the side while studying at school and not had to worry about spending a lot of money on student loans and funding my classes and working a part-time job to pay for said classes, or a full-time job to pay for classes and my horses and my show fees and stuff. And it would have taken a lot of that burden off of me and made the decision a little bit easier. And that's why before having all these financial struggles with my family, it was an easier decision to just be like, oh, I want to be a horse trainer, because I had the freedom to dream, because I had a safety net that I took for granted and didn't even realize was there. And that was a privilege that led me to kind of developing my sense of self and wanting to be a horse trainer and wanting this career. But that came out of having a safety net that allowed me to be like, okay, like I'm safe in wanting to do this and it's a good idea. And like the privilege in the horse world and just like the industry now, this is all without even factoring in like the emotional burnout that can occur from being in the horse world. An emotional burnout is more directly related to like how people might treat you, like trainers, clients, other employees, people at shows, judges, and like that judgment, because people can judge like how you look, your body weight, how you ride, how you fit your horse. And there's a whole lot of, there's whole different layers of judgment just on you as a person. But then on top of that, there's the emotional damage that seeing stressed horses and seeing horses who are being mistreated and seeing trainers and people encourage like harmful mindsets, that's a whole different layer of emotional damage that you can have just by existing in the horse world. And as like a trainer and someone who works with horses for a living and like professionally, so it's very hard because like sometimes this can happen within clients, or it can happen with other trainers, or it'll just be a situation where just by like existing online, I have to see so many videos and disturbing things of horses that are like sad to see and that I would like to see changed. And then also on top of that, see such a high proportion of people willing to defend these very things despite how much research there is against them. And then in person, even just walking through like the average boarding facility or seeing like how barns are being built, it can be really disheartening to see like obvious welfare issues and obviously stressed horses, and just kind of have to turn a blind eye or have people discredit me because of my age or my gender or the fact that I haven't competed at a high enough level, even though I've went and got a relevant education on the topic. That can be really difficult to deal with, and that's kind of a whole new layer of burnout. And I don't think that's something that trainers talk about enough, is that it is really hard to work in the horse community. Not really so much because of the horses. Like, working with the horses is the easiest part, but like the people and their response to science about horses and how they should be trained and cared for, that can be a huge problem, and it can be really disheartening to deal with. And it can honestly mean having to just like turn off your feelings and realize like you can't help horses that you wish you could help, despite knowing that they're distressed or in pain or this or that. And that's a really hard part of being in the horse world, is like that lack of control to be able to help animals that you don't own and that don't belong to you, or to help remodel mindsets that allow people to hurt these animals and not be able to do anything and be helpless to do so. And then on top of that, spending a lot of time trying to put out information to educate people in hopes of them learning, and then having like a fair number of people spit in your face, even if a lot of people do appreciate the information. That's exhausting, because it's a lot of free time and energy and emotional like space put into trying to educate people about horses to better the population. And that can be really, really hard, especially when you have like certain things that just do not hit and lots of people have issues with and are upset about and disagree with, and will just be like, oh, well, you're stupid, even if it's like a science-backed fact. And like, that's really difficult to deal with emotionally too. And then the other thing to consider is, in the horse world, on top of like all of these issues that are specific to the horse world, people have traumas and stuff that's going on outside of them, which kind of goes into what I said about privilege. But like, having to manage that with horses and like manage your behavior emotionally and stay calm around the horses when working with horses when they're dangerous or frustrating and so on, along with dealing with like owners and clients and other horse people and their responses to how you handle horses, on top of dealing with like everything mentally at home, it is a lot. And it's not surprising so many people get burnt out. And I suppose this is a long-winded way of saying that I've been feeling very burnt out the last couple of years. And it's like hit a point where it's like something that I need to talk about, because it's like very easy to make the horse world look and sound glamorous, and like it's like if you work hard enough you can be anything, and that's great. And like, I've worked hard and I'm happy with where I've gotten in my career, and it's amazed me what I've been able to do despite the obstacles thrown in front of me. But it's been very hard and emotionally taxing, and like, it's so easy to become burnt out from that. And like, the burnout kind of takes away some of the sweetness of success, because you're just so tired. And like, honestly, like with my horses, something that I need to be honest about is that like, working with clients and putting so much time and energy into bettering my business so that I can afford to do what I want with my horses and hopefully eventually get my own horse property and really get to where I want in like my career wise, I've had to sacrifice time spent with my own horses and ability to enjoy my own horses by exhausting myself so much working with clients and expanding my business and expanding like my name as a trainer and focusing on that, because that's how I get ahead. And then I'm too mentally and physically exhausted to really do much with my own horses. So it's robbed me of a lot of enjoyment and like the fun and kind of just like the easy times that you and of enjoyment that you can have with your own horses when it's a hobby and you're just playing with them, and that those are the only horses you have to work, and you're not doing hard physical labor with other horses or dealing with some of the other problems that result in burnout that I mentioned. That part's really hard, and that's also partly why I don't have as many videos of my other horses. I've been doing a lot of work with client horses, and I don't typically share a ton of footage of my client horses on YouTube. I do a lot of them for my Patreon videos and whatnot, but it really depends on like if my clients give me permission to share videos or not. And it's just kind of a preference of mine with how people can be online to try to make my channel more about my horses, because that's also what I enjoy filming and editing most. but I haven't really been able to do that. So it's changed the type of videos that I'm putting out, because it's way easier to get in front of a camera and just sit like this and talk, or film my podcast, or film those styles of videos, than it is to, like, after working several horses a day, then go take out my horses at the end of the day after I'm tired and like disenfranchised with the industry for whatever reason, and just exhausted from all of the work that I've been putting in without having like a lengthy period of break. And I need, like, for my own mental health, I'm going to be taking like a break at some point. Like, I'm going to treat myself to a vacation this year. Like, the Shauna Karish clinic that I'm going to is one of those treats for my individualized learning and for me to enjoy my horses. But like, I really need a break, because like I'm at the point where I'm just so burnt out and tired, and I just want to keep getting ahead. But it's like suffocating, because also with like how much prices are jumping up with everything, like our hay prices are going crazy now, and obviously housing prices are. You just look at how quickly everything's changing and how quickly everything's getting priced up and how people are getting priced out, and it's kind of like, what even is the point in trying? Like, they're trying to stop us from succeeding. Like, what's the point in continuing to try when it's like the rental prices here are barely like sustainable long term, let alone actually being able to pay them and save to buy a house? So it's like, what am I even doing this for? And that's kind of like the wall I've hit in the last year, just kind of dealing with everything related to society that's been going on, and like all the social issues and the horse issues. Is it's been way more mentally taxing than I've realized, and it's very emotionally difficult. So I kind of wanted to be forthright about that and share with people and just be like, you're not the only ones that are going through this. And this is like one of the detriments of like getting involved in the horse world from a work standpoint, because it doesn't really matter whether or not you're like a trainer or a groom or an exercise rider or a stable hand. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. There's so many jobs in which you can get like worked so hard that it kind of robs you of the original childlike joy horses brought you. And like, for me, it's done that to a large extent where, yeah, like I'm too tired to work with my horses as much. So then I just kind of go, when I do go and hang out with them, I'm just hanging out with them and giving them treats and letting them exist in their field, and then occasionally working with them. And I used to feel like a lot of guilt about that, and I used to beat myself up about it a lot, and I'm getting better at not doing that, because I've recognized the fact that like if I do anything with them, that's a win, because it's hard to motivate myself to want to do that when I'm really busy with work and just physically exhausted. And like by the time I finished working, I kind of just want to sit down and rest and not be outside anymore. So that's been really hard for me. And it's just kind of about like not holding that against myself and realizing that my horses are fine. They're out with each other. They're enjoying themselves. They have friends. They have forage. They have freedom. And that like I can kind of focus on getting myself rested and healthy so that I can then enjoy them more. And I am working on starting to cut back on clients more and hopefully kind of take a bit of a breather. But expanding my business with like the bridles and stuff kind of adds to that stress, because I do need to continue working and bringing in enough revenue to continue restocking products, because stocking like enough sizes and quantities of everything is very, very expensive. And I don't have any investors. I pay for it all out of pocket. It's all my money, which is why I did just reopen pre-orders for the bridles so that I can hopefully restock more so that everyone gets one, because we've gotten lots of emails, which has also kind of been stressful because I want everyone to be happy. And I know that a lot of people were sad that they couldn't get their size when we sold out, because I can't restock in as large of quantities as other stores. So there's just like all these layers to like the stress, but like I've made the decisions to like work as hard as I have to try to get like this other aspect of my business jump started and stuff. But it definitely is something that I wanted to talk about, because like I feel really burnt out and tired, and this is even with me recognizing the privileges that I did have in getting the start that I did to like the career and helping develop it. But like I'm feeling really burnt out. So I know there's lots of other people out there who are in worse situations that are probably feeling more burnt out. And I'm here for you, and I hope you're doing well, and I hope you get through this. Take care of yourself and just try to do things that make you smile. But yeah, so that's kind of my like unhinged rant on burnout in the horse world and like privilege in the horse world, and just like stuff that frustrates me about that. This is kind of more of like a sit down podcast style video. I probably could have just filmed this as a podcast, but I felt the need to get something up on YouTube. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that and give some context to why I haven't been filming as much with my horses and why like the amount of videos that I upload have really decreased the last little while. It's just been really hard to like motivate myself to do the extra editing and then also filming and just kind of have the energy to like put on a face for YouTube and do that stuff. It's been really difficult to do that because there's just been a lot going on for me. And I'm doing better. I'm in a good place now. I'm trying to work on, yeah, getting better, going to therapy and talking to my therapist about stuff and learning about why some of my chronic anxieties are still here and addressing that. But yeah, I am tired, and it's okay to be tired. It's okay to be burnt out, but we shouldn't feel like we owe it to society to burn ourselves out in the name of like hard work and getting to our goals, because sometimes when you work really hard, if it's unfair, if the standards are unfair, if you're experiencing way more difficulties than other people, no matter how hard you work, it's like the hoops that you have to jump through keep getting moved higher, and then they blame the hard work and your inability to reach them on you, which is not true. It's just that life is genuinely unfair. And I hope that it changes. I really like hope that if I can get my business to the point that I would like it to, where I can like afford to help other people, I want to start doing like kind of scholarship programs and like sponsorships and stuff to help people out, because there's not enough of that in the horse world. And I think we're missing out on a lot of really great talent that we'd be able to see if we allowed things to be more accessible. And that's what I would really like to see. And that's kind of what I hope to do. And I hope that the steps that I've taken with my business and to try to expand how I have will eventually get me to that point, because I've been trying really hard and I really want to get there. And I'm ready to just kind of be at the point where I can just take a breather and relax and be like, nice, I'm where I need to be. I can help myself, I can help my family, and I can help other people, and I feel safe. And I'm not at that point now, and I'm hoping I'll feel safe soon. And I hope that everyone can get to the point where they feel safe and secure in life and happy and not burnt out, because everyone deserves that, no matter like what type of home you were born into. Like security, safety, and happiness and contentment isn't something that you should have to be able to afford to buy. It's something that everyone should have access to, because there's certain things that are just basic human rights. And it's really sad to see the level of selfishness that's being displayed in the world, especially as of late. There's way too many headlines that display like blatant selfishness, where people are getting more bothered by minor personal inconveniences than they do about like mass humanitarian crisis, and just the fact, like just things that are like impacting a lot of people and removing basic rights for them. Like even just like the fact that like in Canada we have a lot of Indigenous reserves that don't even have clean fresh water, and that's been happening for a long time and it's not been addressed. And there's not really any excuse for that not happening when we have certain charities and protests getting tons of money given to them over things that aren't a basic human right. Yeah, so I'm not going to go much more deep than that, but seeing the state of the world has contributed to my burnout for sure, and I'm very tired. But don't worry, guys, I haven't forgotten about you. I intend to try to post more YouTube videos. Part of this for me is that like the weather in the winter and like how dark it gets, it's getting lighter now, but like the rain, like how many weather issues we've had, the snow, the ice, and it being dark early, all of those things make it so hard to want to like apply myself to like do YouTube videos and like film things and do enjoyable things with my horses that would make good YouTube videos. So I'm hoping with the spring and the nicer weather, I'll get the opportunity to do more of that, because I do really like filming videos. I have a lot of ideas that I would like to film. It's just actually getting out there and doing it and having the energy to do so, and feeling like fresh and ready to go. So that's kind of where I'm at. And yeah, I hope everyone else is doing well. If anyone's interested in pre-ordering a bridle, the information for that is down in the description below. And we're doing like a limited quantity of 20 extra pre-orders per size. So I'd recommend getting in as soon as you can, because we're only going to do 20 extra pre-orders after the quantities of the stock that we already ordered in, just so that we don't overwhelm the supplier. So I'd recommend checking those out. I've also released some really cool spring pads that I'll show at the end here in a little carousel. And we have some really nice pad and bonnet sets that are on sale. They're Valentine's Day themed. They're on sale for $10 off per set until Valentine's Day. So you can get a pad and bonnet set for just $65 Canadian or $55 US. Good price. And they're on sale for that until Valentine's Day. So treat yourself. And then also all of the spring designs that I've gotten in so far are now listed and live on the website. And I think they are very cute. So if you want to check those out, feel free to look down at the link in my bio. And I really appreciate everyone who actually listened to this rant because I feel like most people won't want to. Anyways, cheers.